Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Dear viewers, welcome Development Dialogue. Today in the studio we have two spiritual leaders who are engaged in the International Development Program, Fight Against Global Poverty. The first with me is James Morant, is from the new Psalmist Baptist Church in United States, and Reverend Alfred John Bailey, also from United States, from your church's name I've forgotten. The New Psalmist Church, same churches. Welcome, gentlemen. Today, this world is at a crossroad of fighting against poverty, and there is attempts to bring about communities of all faith or none, businesses, political institutions, civil institutions, all working together to fight global poverty. And at the advent of new Sustainable Development Goals, which is very ambitious, 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And one first goal is to end poverty in all its shape and form. It's a very ambitious one. And so there will be very many elements of it. So if I start from you, James, what is your impression of this Sustainable Development Goals and how you see the faith communities playing a role?
Okay, well, first of all, I would agree that they are ambitious. I am actually impressed that a number of countries have been able to gather together and actually commit to that many goals. I am heartened by the fact that they've been able to do this, and I think you have to call, when you have that many goals, and when you have a problem that's that large, you need to have as many forces working as possible. And we look at other societies, we look at civil society, we look at non-government organizations, but often we neglect to look at faith organizations. And I think that faith organizations, faith-based organizations, have an opportunity to advance the agenda, and it's an underutilized resource because actually faith-based organizations and large congregations control so many aspects of an individual's life. And often a faith-based organization has controls that a government doesn't have. And so they can move an agenda more rapidly than a government can. So I think that's a resource that should be used. Of course, my colleague here probably has some additional remarks that he'd like to make since he's a reverend.
Yes, you are more senior spiritual leader in the sense.
Well, I do thank you for the opportunity to be here today. As faith organizations, we do work on changing the hearts and minds of people. That's in the basis of our foundational formation. And what we really want to do is see how we can galvanize persons around, one, educating them on the Sustainable Development Goals. There are many persons who, when you say Sustainable Development Goal, doesn't know any of them. But the beauty is, in these Sustainable Development Goals, especially goal number 1, eradicating poverty, that is one that hits home, I believe, in every faith organization, because it is in our foundational principles to deal with poverty, to deal with, as we would say, the least of these. And being able to relate that educationally and from a spiritual perspective directly relates faith to the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations.
Yeah, John, you have been working with UNICEF, I understand, and from a faith perspective, you entered in the UN secular institutions. Tell me your personal experience. Was it a tough negotiation to go through?
It wasn't actually a tough negotiation or to go through. We actually received a tremendous opportunity. We received a phone call, really, both James and I, to attend a meeting on behalf of the Alliance of Religions and Conservation. And we were just told, literally, to take some notes at the meeting and report those notes back. What we found in that meeting were persons really kind of looking at us after we introduced ourselves, like, okay, we understand while a lot of the major organizations that deal with water, sanitation, and hygiene were in the room, but when they looked at a faith organization, they were kind of looking at us almost to say, well, why are you here? What is your area of expertise as it relates to water, sanitation, and hygiene? And after we began to share, facts like 50% of the schools worldwide are actually influenced or run by faith organizations, persons began to see the power that was actually in the room. And we began to, I would say slowly, be accepted more and more. We were given opportunity after opportunity to the point where we actually developed and currently maintain a mapping website for UNICEF and the Washington Schools Partnership, and overseeing literally a virtual library of Washington School experiences in 53 countries around the world, partnering with about 70 different organizations. And that is where faith organizations need to be and continue to expand their work in this particular area.
Viewers, many of you may not know that water sanitation is one of the key issues that we need to deal with. Currently, around every 22nd, one child is dying due to waterborne diseases, and it is a big struggle. And I understand, James, after having a long career in the US federal government, you have dedicated your life in the humanitarian field, and you are a trustee in the Faith in Water. Can you tell me about the background of Faith in Water and what have you been doing?
The Faith in Water is an offshoot of the Alliance of Religions and Conservation. What we found is that there was such an interest and value in looking at water-related issues that it would be good to have an entity which just looked at those problems. So just in the last month, I would say, Faith in Water has been established. In fact, during this next few days, we're going to try to chart a course for Faith in Water. What we look at is being an honest broker and establishing partnerships and guiding faith organizations on how they can work better with government institutions and with other kinds of institutions. We are new at this. I've worked in the government on many multilateral agreements, government to government, U.S. government to U.S. government and other organizations, other countries. But I have not been that actively involved in a specific entity that's trying to look at a problem related to the environment, such as water. So what we intend to do is seek out as many other like-minded organizations who are working in a number of areas all over the world and see if we can put them together with other organizations and work with our organizations, because there's strength in numbers. And I think we're unique in that we have a spiritual connection, and I think that there are others out there that are looking for the same kinds of things. So we'd like to join our efforts together and see what we can do.
John, I gave you the statistic that every girl, one child is dying in 20 seconds.
Yes.
What is your perspective? How do you wish to deal with it, tackle it?
We have to, as faith organizations, partner with secular organizations, educating them about the facts that one child doesn't need to die every 20 seconds. That is something that is unacceptable for every faith. I think us working together on a common cause will actually be able to strengthen us so that we can eradicate that particular problem. That's something that doesn't need to exist in this world. And we have the power as faith organizations. It's built into our foundation that these are problems that we can solve. But we have to come out of our silos. We have to put aside our differences and come together for some of the most vulnerable population on the planet. And that may be even our children.
Yes, so John, on a practical level, we operate in Somaliland, say for example. We have done water well, boreholes and so on. But in some areas, the settlement is approximately 10 kilometers away, where people has to come that far to carry this. So while there is you have the will to go and make water available, but the infrastructure is not there to carry the water there. How do we combat this?
I think that's the beauty of the partnership of faiths working with secular organizations. Many of the UN organizations and part of the Washington Schools partnership organizations that we work with are organizations that are totally different from us. They have scientific knowledge and data that will help us to be able to do things that we ordinarily wouldn't do. They have areas of expertise that we don't have. And I think the combination of them bringing their scientific knowledge and data may be able to prevent a person from working or walking 10 kilometers to get water. There may be another way that family, that child, that woman may not have to go that far to get water. But again, it is the faith organization working in the community, working with their partners in the scientific field who have that expertise and knowledge.
We had an instance before Faith and Water. I actually worked with water committees in Africa, and we worked on trying to set up a process so that these water committees could work with their local communities to figure out exactly how to move water between those communities, and hopefully.
Is it transportation even?
Yes, yes.
Right.
And actually, in one of the instances, we actually built a way for the water to go up the side of the mountain with piping and stuff like that. So it was just the opportunity to get those people together and help them move forward. So a lot of what we do and a lot of what we want to do is see if we can reduce the friction in between communities, and see if we can have those communities work together with us, or we can get resources to that community. So it's a big job, and it will require some skill on our part in terms of working locally, but I think it's something that we have to do, something we must do.
Yeah, I think both of you are working within the Faith in Water and building a close partnership with UNICEF would pave the way, particularly many of the schools which poor infrastructure to providing this access to clean water. I mean, organization like ourselves, Al-Khair Foundation, we built boreholes. We have got a big rig now in Somaliland, which can, it's very expensive, about $1 million machinery. We've taken them so that it can move into place to dig boreholes and so on. I think partnership at that level where you have identified the community who needs the water and needs, and we can bring in, dig the well, right, and somebody locally to maintain it, because maintenance is also one of the big issues.
And that's why establishing water committees helps you do that.
Yes.
And the other thing that we're really concerned about, both Al and I have talked about it in the past, if you don't have security and if you don't feel safe, like young girls trying to go fetch water and traveling long distances to do that, or not being able to handle their personal hygiene in a way that isn't embarrassing or doesn't keep them out of school. We want to look at those kinds of things so that they miss less time in school, they get more of an education, and that will help them come out of poverty. If you have educated young people, and if you have families that are moving forward with those young people, they have a greater opportunity of getting an education, being able to get a job, and being able to provide for their families.
I mean, John, have you ever piloted in terms of using the donkey who can carry the water from A to B? So that can create livelihood. So yes, some young, I mean, like these young girls carrying water 5-10 kilometers and vulnerable pockets. So that can be averted easily if we are able to create livelihood among the young men and boys through a donkey. And
I mean, that's very true. What we all know is that the bringing of the Sustainable Development Goals into existence in 2015 is going to mean that governments are going to provide resources to make it possible. We just have to make sure that those resources that are coming from the governments get down to the least of those, creating jobs, creating livelihoods for people. And again, that sometimes has to come from not the UN organizations, but the UN organizations providing the information to the faith organizations so they can share that information with the faith organizations, empower them, strengthen them to advocate to their governments. Because the Sustainable Development Goals will never be effective if people don't know them and they don't know how to, if they don't express them to their governments in such a way that these changes can happen. So faith organizations are really, really, really crucial in this area of advocacy. We have to educate our people and we have to teach them, in essence, how to speak to their government officials and say, these are the things that must happen. If you want to eradicate poverty, you have to be able to educate your people to advocate for it. And when they advocate for it, that's when you see jobs. That's when you see new innovative technology. And you employ those very persons who may have to walk that 10 kilometers.
Excellent. I think, James, what is your take with regard to changing the vocabulary of the churches and the mosques, like the educating the issues of water, say, for example?
Changing them.
Their vocabulary, their what do you call it? Their regular sermons, their sermons to comprise of the practical issues.
Well, I think some of that is already happening in our congregation. For example, we have about 8,000 people in our church. And prior to, I would say, 2004 or 2005, our pastor never really preached or provided sermons about the environment or about connecting faith principles to the environment. And as a result of him doing some work in Africa and elsewhere, he began coming back and providing sermons that awakened people in our church. And they became, or tried to become, more knowledgeable about issues of poverty, issues of water and the significance of water in our doctrine, and significance of things like rubbish, trash, and trash removal. We started a recycling program in the church. And so, just like our pastor was awakened, he was able to provide sermons, and he was able to, he even had a celebration 2 years ago, longer than that, about 3 years ago, where he actually used the children in the church to begin to give an environmental message. It takes a while, but you have to start someplace. And so our pastor, we have seen our pastor begin to energize the church. And we think that that can be replicated in other places. So if you talk about sermons, we have an opportunity for him he's already done that. And we have a magazine that we published called Empowering Disciples. You can use that as a vehicle to get more information to young people. I think we've established sort of Friday coffee shop discussions with our young people to begin to show them how this is an important issue. And very informal with the young people, but it's happening. So you've got your pastor providing top-down information. You've got young people being energized by people like Reverend Al. And it's a process. And that's what we're undertaking now. And we hope to be able to carry that into Faith and Water and other places as well.
Thank you very much, James. Reverend Alfred John Bailey, I'm so touched by your commitment to come and talk to our viewers on Iqra TV. You are flying out in 10 minutes' time.
Yes.
But thank you at the last moment. Dear brothers and sisters, you have seen the examples of two spiritual leaders from our Christian faith, our brothers from the Christian faith. They are changing the vocabulary of their faith institutions. Let us talk to our imams, our faith leaders from the mosques, to change the vocabulary, talk about water. More than 1 billion people do not have access to water. 1,000 million people do not have access to clean water. Every 20 seconds, a child is dying because of access to clean water, waterborne diseases. Let us engage our mosque with a new language so that we can begin to deal with one of the big shortage of water globally. With this message, I conclude. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.